Hi everyone, welcome to our first training session for Westridge Community Church staff team building. We are going to do a series of trainings, and the first one is going to be building teamwork by increasing trust. So let's do a little bit of defining of what our goal is for today. So we have created a team here at Westridge, and we want to make sure we are as successful as possible. One of the most important ingredients to successful teams is trust. In fact, Stephen Covey says that you know it when you feel it. Simply put, trust means confidence. The opposite of trust, distrust, is suspicion. And then I really like Dr. Townsend's definition of trust. It is simply being careless. You know, at first, I didn't really understand this. Careless has some negative connotations in my mind. However, if you think about it, when are you careless? For me, it's when I can let down my guard, when I'm not afraid of what I'm thinking, when I can just be myself, all myself, good and bad. And if I can behave this way, that means that there's a sense of trust. I trust the people around me. Well, Covey also talks about how trust it just has great impact on a team. So first, the economics of trust are very clear. If we have low trust, then we're going to yield low speed at a high cost, which we don't want. And if we have high trust, we're going to yield high speed at a low cost, which is something we do want. So this just the economics of trust make us want to make sure that we are pursuing this at all costs. Covey also talks about how trust is a hidden variable, and it can either take away from performance or multiply it. So we obviously would like to multiply our meager resources here at Westridge, and so we want to keep this in mind because trust is powerful. Henry Cloud says that in the end, trust is about the heart. If you gain people's trust, their heart, then you also have their desire and passion. And we all know that if we can access people's passions, then we will get high production. So have any of you ever heard of Zappos, the online shoe company? Well, Tony Hsieh is the CEO, and he writes about his core group of friends this way. He says that the connectedness we felt was making all of us happier. I made a note to myself to make sure I never lost sight of the value of a tribe where people truly felt connected and cared about the well-being of one another. So he experienced something that I hope that we've all experienced, and that is that connection leads to trust, which leads to success. And so that's part of what we want to accomplish on our staff. So let's take a minute to think about the place where you feel most connected. So I would go ahead and lead a discussion on asking people, where do they feel most connected and why do they feel connected? And hopefully people are able to identify that they feel connected when they are around people that they know they can trust, that they know they can be themselves, and kind of identify some of those perspectives and just the characteristics of trust. So after that conversation, we would move on. So you see how trust really does help people to be themselves. It really helps to connect people, and you can see how this would be a powerful thing on our staff. In fact, Patrick Lencioni even wrote in his book, The Advantage, that the single greatest advantage that any company can achieve is organizational health, and he believes that this starts with establishing trust on the leadership team. So that brings me to us, the leadership team of Westridge. Where are we now in terms of establishing trust with each other, and where do we want to be? Currently, we are almost 5 years old, And every year we've added at least one, if not two, new members of our staff. So last month I did a cultural assessment of our staff, and I found that we do several things really well. First, we share a common value in that we are all committed to personal growth, and this is a great starting place. I also learned that we are also very committed to our team. And so I was relieved to see that the commitment is there. So in the area of building this team, I found that we essentially have established what's called a functional trust. This means that we feel like our team is reliable to accomplish what each person has committed to accomplish. So Dr. Townsend defines functional trust as having alignment between saying and doing. For example, if Rachel says, "Hey, I can make copies for you on Wednesday, just let me know," I know that when I send her an email that says, "Hey, can you make some copies for the study tonight?" that she will have it done. In fact, that happened this last week. I sent it to her and she forgot to email me back to say it was done, but I didn't even worry about it because I knew that she had done it. And sure enough, I got there Wednesday night and the copies were on the sound booth. So we have established a functional trust. Well, there's another type of trust that is needed to establish full trust on a team, and that is relational trust. Now, this is a little bit different because it goes a little bit deeper into how a person handles knowledge of the vulnerable parts of your life. For example, when you admit a failure, do people move toward you or away from you? Do you feel safe to be vulnerable on our staff? And maybe you might feel vulnerable or safe to be vulnerable with some people, but not everybody. And so this is just one of those areas that we want to really focus on. So when people have established relational trust, they're able to be vulnerable, but then they're also able to pursue conflict. And this is because they trust the people in the relationship and they know that conflict will not end it. I was so blown away earlier this spring when I got to listen to Nancy Ortberg speak, and she encouraged organizations to pursue conflict, to go looking for it. And it made me ask that question, do we go looking for conflict? And at this point, I'm not sure we do. And so it's one of those things I'd like to explore a little bit further. But that's a characteristic of having strong relational trust. Now, relational trust continues in healthy accountability. And this is where both people desire growth, and we've already established that we all value growth, so we all desire this. And so the next step is going to be trusting each other to tell each other the truth in loving ways as we seek that growth. And so accountability helps us to do this, and it helps us all to grow. And if we have good relational trust, we'll be able to do this in ways that help all of us to accomplish our goal of growing. And then teams with relational trust also operate out of an idea that Patrick Lencioni calls team number one. And this means that the team members truly prioritize the success of the entire team above the success of their subgroup. Lencioni states that people in these types of teams must put the needs of the higher team ahead of the needs of their departments. So for example, I am in charge of the women's ministries, and if that starts to butt heads with the youth ministry, we need to back up and say, okay, well, what is the overall goal? What are the interests of Westridge Community Church as a whole? And put those needs before my specific needs with women's ministry. So when teams can develop all aspects of relational trust, we're going to experience maximized performance. We're going to do better because we're going to be working together so well that we get the most out of our efforts. You know, this is something that I've been thinking about for longer than just the time I've been in this class. In fact, last fall, when we all met at Legacy Counseling to introduce ourselves to the therapist, I was amazed because I walked away with greater insight. And the insight wasn't in their counseling business, but into our staff. And you might be wondering why, but if you remember, they had all of us introduce ourselves and tell a little bit more about what we do. And Justin and Chuck took 5 to 10 minutes, which was way over time, I might add, but they took that time to introduce themselves, and it was the first time that I had ever heard, even after working with them for over a year, but it was the first time that I had ever heard their heart and passion for what they do. And it opened my eyes to why they're in their positions. And I felt relational trust grow a little that day because they shared in a vulnerable way. And it made me wish that we had more opportunities to grow in this type of trust. And so, again, that's our goal, is to be able to build this relational side of trust, because I think we have the functional side pretty good. Before we move on, okay, so we're going to show that video, and as you do, again, just look for ways that you can see the characteristics of relational trust in this team. All right, so what characteristics did you see? Yeah, you can see how they were willing to put the needs of each other in front of themselves. You can see how they trusted each other with, like the one let the other player hit in his place. The coach talked about their selflessness, about the sacrifices they made, about working hard even though they were hurting, and it was for the success of the team. So this is a picture of what we want on our team. And we have a good start, but I think we have room to grow in that relational trust. So how are we going to do this? Well, as we move forward, we are going to engage in team building exercises. But they may not be the type that you would imagine. We are not going to do trust falls, and we are not going to build buildings with toothpicks and clay. I know, some of you are super disappointed. Maybe we can do this next time. But instead, we're going to start with learning how to build relational trust, and Patrick Lencioni calls it vulnerability-based trust. And I think this name helps give us a clue about how to develop relational trust. The bottom line is it's going to require vulnerability. He describes this type of trust sounding like, I screwed up, or I need help, or your idea is better than mine, and I'm sorry. And so we're going to pursue opportunities that allow us to be vulnerable with each other. Because the bottom line is that at the heart of vulnerability lies the willingness of people to abandon their pride and their fear, to sacrifice their egos for the collective good of the team. And we want to do that. So one way to start creating vulnerability in our staff is to start small. And we're going to start with what Lencioni calls personal history. So what we're going to do is we're going to it'll probably take about 45 minutes for all of us to go. And each person is going to get 5 to 10 minutes to share a simple personal history. And then you're going to include the following information. You're going to include when and where you were born, the birth order in your family, and if you have any insight or have seen how that's played out in your life. I want you to share a fond childhood memory, but I also want you to describe a difficult childhood challenge. So again, everybody's going to go, and we're going to spend about 45 minutes doing this, and when we're done, we will kind of debrief. So here we go. So now that everybody has done this and has participated, I want you to ask yourself this question. Do you feel closer to your staff, or do you feel more nervous and farther away from your staff? And so here's a chair in the middle, and I want you to literally come and stand either close to the chair, meaning that you feel much closer to the group, Or if you feel farther away, then you need to stand farther back. So let's